Chapter 1881. Colton pushed Freya's hand away, tossed his coat aside, and walked toward the bathroom. Freya sat stiffly on the bed, pursed her lips, listened to the sound of running water coming from inside the bathroom, and could not help but tighten her grip on the blanket. Sure enough, his hatred for me hasn't changed at all. Then what did he mean when he gave me the necklace and kissed me 3 years ago? As Colton walked out of the bathroom in a bathrobe, water vapor encircled him, and the water droplets that had not been wiped rolled down his beating neck. He dried his hair with a towel and turned to look at Freya. Freya leaned against the head of the bed with her legs bent and an aggrieved expression as if she had been wronged. Does she feel wronged? Pfft, she's just pretending when I'm around. He placed the towel on the countertop, walked over, and stood beside the bed. Aren't you going to take a shower? She returned to her senses and did not look at him. No. Disgusting much? If you think I'm disgusting then, before she could finish the sentence, she felt her whole body leaving the ground as Colton had picked her up and was carrying her into the bathroom. Freya struggled to break free. I told you that I don't want to bathe. Let me down. She was dropped into a tub full of warm water, and the water drenched her bathrobe. Under the light of the blazing LED lights, the puddles on the tiled floor rippled as the reflection of the person soaking in the bathtub swayed. The rosy lips and pale face formed an extremely vivid scene, and the atmosphere was seductive, fueling him. His eyes dimmed as he leaned down, clasped the back of her head with his palm, and kissed her without any warning. She breathed with difficulty. We should talk. Colton turned her over and kissed her shoulder. What do you want to talk about? Freya grabbed the edge of the bathtub tightly. I won't hold you accountable for what happened, and we don't owe each other anything after tonight. Can you agree to this? He paused for a few seconds, grabbed her by her jawline, and turned her face around. Do you think I've come to you in order to allow you to hold me accountable? She bit her lip. Then what do you plan to do to me? He gnashed his teeth, scoffed, pressed his lips against the side of her neck, and stirred the water. I won't hold myself accountable for what happened. On the contrary, I'm only toying with you. Freya Pruitt, you won't be able to go anywhere until I get tired of you. The next day, in the studio. Daisy had been waiting for Freya's call since she sat through her makeup in the morning, and she could not help but feel a little worried. After all, she was not from Basburg, so what if she encountered a bad person? James appeared outside the dressing room and leaned against the door. You women can really take forever to put on your makeup, huh? Daisy put her cell phone down and looked at him through the mirror. Have you memorized the lines? She had to work with James in the same crew this time. That was what Charlie wanted. In the past 3 years, James has participated in more variety shows than filming and has completely become a well-known artist in the variety show aspect. That was because Charlie had found out that James' acting skills were bad, but when he was allowed to display his skills on variety shows freely, he actually managed to steal the limelight. In fact, James was not useless. At least he had always been a master of all kinds of games. Even if it were an innovative game that the production team came up with, he would get the hang of it after 1 to 2 rounds. With that game sense in his pocket, he never held his teammates back but would become the mastermind of his team most of the time. And after so long, he finally obtained the opportunity to be part of a film production. Charlie was worried that James would not perform well, so he hoped Daisy would guide James along his way. James was the second male lead in the crew, playing the son of a nobleman in Yennis. It was not difficult to play a character that shared the same personality as himself in real life. All he needed to do was to be himself. However, the difference in characteristics would be huge in the later stage of the script, because it was set in the script that the character's family would be ruined in the later stage. The people who supported him before that would then turn against him and ridicule him. James would have to transition from an arrogant son of a rich family to a desolate orphan of an aristocrat, which was why Charlie was afraid James might not be able to perform well. Chapter 1882. James crossed his arms. It's just reciting the script. Nothing can be simpler than this. Daisy had finished putting on her makeup, so she got up with the script in her hand and walked toward him. Then will you practice with me now? Practice? What's the point? Daisy hit him with the script. They're shooting our scene today. If you screw up on me, I'll beat the crap out of you. He ducked and giggled again. Okay, fine, it's just practice. It won't be difficult enough for me to screw it up. 15 minutes later. Daisy glared at James, who had exaggerated acting skills and had been jumping in and out of character. She was so angry that she flung the script at him. James Tell, have you even read the script? James dodged right and left with the script. Don't hit me. I just forgot the lines. He ran out of the door and bumped into someone without looking. Freya staggered backward and was about to hit the prop box placed in the corridor. But James instantly reached out and pulled her. Be careful. Daisy heard the movement outside and ran out, only to see James and Freya falling on the prop box. Freya did not feel the pain because James became her human cushion. However, the prop box that was swaying from side to side was on the verge of tipping over and dropping onto both of them. Freya stretched out her hand, propped them against it just in time to prevent it from falling, and then looked at James. Sir, are you all right? James was stunned. The lady right in front of him captured all his attention. Her indifferent look and temperament were exactly what he liked. He had never believed in love at first sight before this, but he did now. Daisy stepped forward and helped Freya up. Freya, are you all right? I'm fine, James got up quickly, tidied his slightly messy costume, and smiled. I'm fine. Freya nodded. Glad to hear that. Daisy found that James had been staring at Freya, so she subconsciously pulled Freya behind her and approached him. James, what are you doing? James returned to his senses, looked away, and cleared his throat. Is this your friend? Yes, she's my assistant too. Your assistant? James suddenly became interested and stretched his hand out to Freya. From what I heard, your name is Freya? It's nice to meet you. I'm Daisy's senior in the agency, and my name is James Tell. Freya was at a loss. Is everyone from Zlokova this enthusiastic? She shook hands with him out of politeness and nodded. It's nice to meet you too. She then withdrew her hand and turned to look at Daisy. Sorry, I got here late. Daisy smiled and wrapped her arm around hers. Nah, you got here just on time. Let's go. I'll show you around the studio. James froze on the spot and stared fixedly at his empty palm, feeling as if something had just slipped away in an instant. Yes, I'm confident that my heart has just been stolen. He chased after them. Hey, wait for me. Daisy brought Freya around to get acquainted with the crew, and James followed them all the time as if he were their bodyguard. At this time, a female artist sitting in the nanny's car saw James following Daisy everywhere and clenched her hand holding the corner of her script tightly, crumpling the papers. The scandal between James and Daisy had been going around for 3 years. Although their agent helped them clarify their relationship with each other to the public and media, James was rather close with Daisy. Could it be that the person that James likes is Daisy? However, from what I see, Daisy chooses to ignore James most of the time. It seems that it's only James' wishful thinking. She had met James on a variety show and was assigned to James's group when they were playing games. The James that she got to know was not as difficult to get along with as rumored. On the contrary, he was very serious throughout the game and tried his best to help his teammates clear the level. That was how she took a fancy to James. Chapter 1883. And it was also because of James that she had taken up this film project. However, the beau that she fancied had turned into a servant when he was around Daisy. Thus, how could she not feel annoyed by that? Her assistant saw something was wrong with her and asked, Susan, is everything all right? Daisy Vanderbilt just won the Best Actress award, didn't she? What's there to be proud of? Even my Prince Charming is following her around like a pet willingly. Who the heck would show her this much respect if she were not the daughter of the Goldmans? Susan was so infuriated that she could not even go through the script by herself. The assistant was helpless. She's born with a silver spoon, so we can't just make a 1-to-1 comparison between her and us, can we? Besides, James and Daisy are both from the upper class, so isn't it normal that they can get along better? Susan glared at her. So are you saying that Daisy is a good match for my Prince Charming? The assistant quickly waved. That's not what I meant, Susan snorted as her gaze was fixed in their direction. Daisy Vanderbilt, just you wait. I'll surely turn your life into a living hell. At that moment, God seemed to have presented her with an opportunity as she saw James ordering a cup of coffee from a cafe nearby. The waiter delivered the coffee to the crew, placed it next to James' folding chair, and left. Susan thought of something, and a glimmer of smugness flashed across her eyes. He must have bought that for Daisy. Even God is on my side today. The crew was about to start filming. Today's scene was the storyline where the female lead, played by Daisy, and the second male lead encountered assassins in a restaurant. The drama was a conspiracy thriller. Because of the identity setting of the male and female leads, the romance between both the leads was quite obscure, and there was almost no intimate kiss scene. The male lead was the master of the assassin organization that adopted the female lead. He was also conspiring to overthrow the Prince of the Kingdom. The fact that the organization adopted the female lead made him her nominal foster father, so he taught her martial arts and even used her to get himself closer to the authorities in order to get his hands on confidential information. However, later in the script, he develops feelings for the female lead, making him a very contradictory and complicated role. On the contrary, the second male lead was the son of a nobleman in Yenis, a wild but loyal bohemian. He and the female lead became friends in adversity, and finally became each other's confidants. After all, the female lead shared more scenes with the second male lead than the male lead in the original novel. Even though the male lead took the throne and became emperor in the end, he still parted ways with the female lead because they disagreed with each other over their ideologies, and the second male lead was the one who accompanied her as she went into the mountains. In this script, in addition to the heavy emotions between the male and female leads, also showcased the trickeries, strategies, calculations, the love and hate relationship that entangled the characters, and the friendship that was formed through thick and thin. The director sat in front of the monitor, the on-site camera equipment was all ready, and the filming started officially. The actors who played the assassins hung themselves on wires, dashed on the eaves, jumped over the walls, and landed in the inn. Daisy had plenty of experience and moved around the scene smoothly during the fighting scenes. Cut. Suddenly, the director shouted, stood up, and picked up the loudspeaker. James, you entered the frame a little too early. We'll retake the whole scene. James redid it, but after repeating it 3 or 4 times, the director could no longer stand it. James, what in the world is wrong with you? Daisy turned her head and saw that James' expression did not look too great, so she stepped forward and asked, "Hey, are you okay?" The director noticed something was wrong too and got up from his seat. What's going on? James covered his stomach and held his breath. Director, my stomach hurts. I can't hold it in any longer. He then sprinted toward the restroom immediately. Everyone present exchanged gazes. The director covered his forehead as he was at a loss for words. He cast James only because he felt that the role setting of the second male lead was similar to that of James. He did not expect this to happen during the first shoot, he was too careless with his casting. However, after James went to the restroom, he went back. In another 2 to 3 times. When he came out of the restroom, he looked all feeble, and his facial complexion was extremely pale. The director asked the staff to help him out of the studio to grab some rest. But in order to catch up with the progress, they went on to film the other scenes that only had the female lead first. Chapter 1884. Meanwhile, Susan came to the scene triumphantly, wanting to watch Daisy get scolded for slowing the crew's progression down. Who would have expected that all she saw was Daisy filming another scene while James was nowhere to be seen? She immediately felt that something was wrong. Susan quickly asked a staff member, "Aren't we filming Daisy and James' scene today? Why don't I see James filming?" The staff member replied, "Mr. Tell is feeling unwell and is having diarrhea, so he is on a break for the time being." Diarrhea. Susan froze in place as her legs wobbled. How could this be? Could it be that Daisy didn't drink the cup of coffee that I spiked with laxatives, so he drank it himself? She had assumed it was for Daisy, so she even added many laxatives on purpose. Fuck. This is all Daisy's fault. After Daisy finished filming, she and Freya went to the lounge to visit James. James' face looked as pale as paper, and his stomach kept grumbling. Fuck, man. There must be something wrong with that cup of coffee. Daisy wondered. The coffee? She suddenly remembered that James had bought Freya a cup of coffee earlier, but Freya did not drink it, so he drank it by himself. Freya was startled. Are you referring to the cup of coffee that you bought me? Initially, James had given her this cup of coffee, but she was not familiar with James, so she thought it was not very appropriate for her to drink something from him for no reason. As such, she declined his kind offer. James forced a smile. Thank God, you didn't drink it. Otherwise, you'd be. Before he could finish speaking, he inhaled sharply and held his breath. I can't take it any longer. He dashed straight to the restroom again. Daisy was helpless. It seems that he won't be able to film today. I'll go get him some medicine to stop his diarrhea. After all, he was an artist from the same company and her senior in name, so she should take care of him. She got up and left the lounge. Freya received a text message at this time. Upon seeing that it was from Colton, her expression stiffened instantly. It was already 5 p.m. when Daisy finished filming. When she and Freya walked out of the studio, they saw Colton waiting in front of the car. Freya subconsciously avoided his gaze when she saw him, making her seem unnatural. Daisy ran over. Colton, how are you so free to come and pick us up? Colton responded with a light hum, and his gaze was fixed on Freya for a split second before shifting across the scene. I'll send you girls back. The two got into the car, and Daisy asked Freya where she lived. Freya paused for a bit, but Colton had already reassured Daisy, just as she was about to answer the question. I'll send her back. You don't have to worry about her. Daisy was astonished and looked at the two of them. The atmosphere between the two of them has been very strange ever since we got into the car. There's an indescribable awkwardness. Colton first sent Daisy back to the Goldman mansion. After Daisy got out of the car, she did not forget to lower her head next to the window of the driver's seat. Colton, can you really send Freya back to her place safely? Colton clicked his tongue and pushed her head out of the car with his finger. Shut your trap and go in. Daisy watched as Colton drove away. Why do I feel like I can't trust Colton at all? Daisy walked into the mansion and heard someone's voice before she arrived in the living room. She was slightly startled and saw an extra person sitting on the couch. It was Nolace. Maisie placed her teacup down. Daisy, you've come back just in time. Your Nolly has been waiting for you. Daisy's cheeks warmed up immediately, and she hurried forward, pulled Nolace up, and took him out immediately. Nolan's expression dimmed. He placed the contract down and took off his glasses. Just open your eyes and look. That brat is everything that our daughter sees now. Maisie sneered and leaned forward. But all I see is you. Nolan rubbed his body against hers. Then will my wife soothe my injured heart after this? Chapter 1885. Maisie smiled. Get lost. Daisy let go of Nolace's hand in the courtyard and turned around. Why didn't you tell me in advance that you're coming over? Nolace pulled her drooping fringe to the side of her face, tucked it behind her ear, and gave off a faint smile. Am I this unpresentable? Of course not. She explained, but what if my father were to make life difficult for you when I wasn't here? Nolace paused for a split second, lowered his gaze, and his smile intensified. Do you see me as someone who'd be afraid of a difficult situation? Daisy shook her head. Your skin is way too thick to be afraid of that. He laughed out loud. I'm glad that you know that. The afterglow was poured over the luxuriant courtyard, making it look like an oil painting. The servants who passed by looked into the pavilion. When standing together, the two of them looked even better than the breathtaking scenery. Daisy turned her head, and her gaze was fixed on Nolace. I haven't seen him for 3 years, and he seems to have gotten more dazzling. Let's ignore the fact that he looks better than a girl, he's also such a successful man. And the main thing is that he's so flirtatious with girls and so gentle at the same time. All girls should fancy such a man, shouldn't they? I've been in the entertainment industry for so long, and none of the male celebrities that I've ever met look better than him. If he were to make a debut in the industry, he'd definitely be regarded as the best-looking beau of the industry. Nolace tilted his head to look at her, and a hint of hilarity beamed through his light-colored pupils. Do I look good? She nodded subconsciously, came back to her senses all of a sudden, and looked away instantly. I was just thinking that if you were to debut with your looks, you'd definitely be the best-looking male celebrity the industry has to offer. Oh, really? Nolace leaned over and approached her. Do you want me to make a debut? She choked on her own words. I was just blabbering for fun. If he were to make a debut, he would turn the whole showbiz and the internet upside down. If that turns out to be the case, just how many love rivals will I have to compete against? Her face was reflected in his pupils. He captured a trace of nervousness and worry from her expression, and a hint of amusement overflowed from his eye sockets. Don't worry. I won't make a debut. You'll be the only person in the world that gets to appreciate my good looks. Daisy's cheeks could not help but warm up as she turned her face away from his burning gaze. It's been 3 years, how can I still be this susceptible to his flirtation? She took a deep breath and turned her head to face the handsome face that could enchant all beings on earth. Your flirting no longer works on me. Oh really? He approached, and his lips were less than an inch away from her cheek. Then what about my charm? Daisy gulped her saliva as her gaze turned a little hazy. Nolace casually unbuttoned a button on the collar of his shirt while fixing his eyes on her. The cedar fragrance that proliferated from his suit was extremely volatile as the space between the two was very narrow. Daisy raised her hand, pushed his face away, and lowered her head. Okay, fine, I'll admit defeat. He grabbed her wrist and kissed her palm. The slight graze numbed her and made her withdraw her hand immediately as she blushed. You've overstepped. He smiled. Okay, I'll stop teasing you. If you were to pounce on me out here, it'd be difficult for me to explain it to everybody here. Daisy frowned. I won't. Nolace stayed for dinner, and the dining table's atmosphere was subtle but oppressive. The atmosphere between Nolan and Nolace was different from the others. It was only natural for the father-in-law and son-in-law not to take a liking to each other no matter what. Daisy covered her forehead and wanted to think of a way to brighten the atmosphere. She then remembered something all of a sudden. By the way, Colton sent Freya back. Why hasn't he come back yet? Nolace chuckled but did not answer. Maisie squinted. Is Freya the friend you mentioned to me when you were abroad? Daisy said with a smile, yes, she came to Basberg to find me. I'll introduce her to you someday when you're free. Okay. Maisie had long wanted to meet Daisy's best friend. When Colton returned to the mansion, it was already a little later than 11 p.m. He walked upstairs, and that was when a silhouette appeared behind him. He became extremely vigilant instantly. Who's that? Chapter 1886. Nolace lazily leaned against the wall. You're back late. Colton was surprised, but looked calm. You're still here? He smiled. I'm staying over. Nolace's eyes focused on Colton's loosened tie and the bite marks that were peeking out of his collar, and he smiled. You seem to be moving quickly with my cousin. Colton frowned but didn't speak. Knowles walked past him and stopped behind him but didn't look back. Are you serious about her? It's none of your business. Colton walked to his room. Knowles turned his head, looked while Colton disappeared into the shadows, and squinted because he could see the truth. The next day, at the shoot, James took some electrolytes, rested for a night, and finally got some energy back. He sat in the car and read the script while looking for someone in the crowd. Susan Hotch brought a beautiful container with food over to him and smiled. James, have you had lunch? James paused and frowned. You are? Susan awkwardly said, you don't remember me? I'm Susan Hotch. We've worked together on a show. He remembered her. Oh, it's you. Can I help you? She lowered her head shyly and clutched the container. I wanted to ask if you've had lunch. If you don't mind, Daisy, over here. James saw Daisy, and his eyes lit up. He cut Susan off while he stood up and waved his arm. Susan felt ashamed and unhappy that she was ignored. Daisy walked toward him and said, oh, it looked like you've recovered. Yes, I almost died yesterday. I'm glad that my body was tough enough. I gave the cafe a bad review last night because I was so angry. James got angry upon recalling what happened last night. That drink wasn't made from coffee but laxatives. It shamed him in front of the woman he was interested in. He remembered something and looked around. Where's your assistant? Daisy crossed her arms and glared at him. Don't you even think about it? James had been very nice to Freya since last night and had even bought coffee for her. Something must be going. James flashed a wide smile. We've known each other for a long time already. I'm not that kind of person. Ms. Vanderbilt. Susan, the ignored party, finally lost it. She tried to control her expression and smiled. I think your acting skills are way better than some of the seniors here. You're definitely the best actress. She said that loudly to pretend to praise her, but she was just trying to compliment her while insulting the seniors. A few older actors had been acting for more than 2 decades and were quite good. Even though Daisy had started as a child actor and had earned the Best Actress award, the seniors still had the upper hand when it came to experience. If Daisy agreed to these compliments, it would mean that she was offending the seniors with an arrogant attitude. The entertainment industry loved to twist things around. Lots of actors had been shunned because they had said something wrong. Before Daisy could speak, James proudly said, of course, you should know who's supporting her. He wanted to emphasize that she worked under Charlie. Charlie had turned him into an A-lister, so it wouldn't be surprising if Daisy became the Best Actress award winner. However, from Susan's perspective, James was saying that Daisy was his woman. Chapter 1887. Susan's expression was subtly dark. They were that far off already? Daisy glared at James. Why are you showing off? When are you getting the Best Actor award for Charlie? He turned away. I'm not interested in that. I'm just here to pass the time. Daisy's lips curled as she said, you're addicted to being useless? Ms. Vanderbilt, how could you say that about James? Susan quietly spoke up for him. It's not his fault that he's not talented. I believe that he has already done his best. If she spoke up for him, he might feel thankful. See? I am the only one who really understands him. Daisy looked at Susan, with whom she hadn't worked much since joining the team. Her character hadn't shown up in the movie yet. Daisy was having a normal conversation with James, but it seemed like she was looking down on him in Susan's eyes. Before Daisy spoke, James' expression changed. I'm speaking to Daisy. Why are you interfering? Susan was stunned. James. And you said that I'm not talented? TSK. I just want to pass my time. If I was really serious about it, getting the Best Actor award would just be a matter of time. He crossed his arms in disgust. He was familiar with Daisy, so it was acceptable for her to call him useless. However, he wouldn't be very happy if someone he didn't know well called him useless. Susan's knee jerked. Daisy had called him useless, but she was the one who offended him by defending him. Daisy patted his shoulder. If Charlie saw you now, he would probably shed a tear of pride. But I still want to be useless. He turned away and said, "It's nice that way." At least, he thought that it was. Susan gnashed her teeth, watching how happily they were interacting. Her crush must have been blinded by Daisy. She couldn't let that go on. Susan found an excuse and left. Daisy watched her walk away and asked, "Is she a fan of yours?" James waved his hand. "Fan? We're not close. We've just worked together during a show." "She's weird." Freya quickly got to the filming location. Daisy was holding a huge parasol, standing under the sun and reading the script. The makeup artist was helping her touch up her makeup. "Daisy." Freya walked to her and took the parasol over. "You can focus on the script. I'll hold this for you." Daisy looked at the light-colored scarf around her neck and asked, "Don't you feel hot?" Freya paused and touched the scarf while avoiding eye contact. "Not at all. The collar is a little low, so it feels weird not to have something around my neck." Daisy was curious because her collar was just under her collarbone. That wasn't low. The filming started, so the actors and crew got into position. Freya stood and watched from the side. Daisy was born to be an actress because she was able to portray the character so well. Even if she was acting alongside more experienced actors, she was able to handle it well. The next scene involved the female lead getting whipped by the male lead because she didn't finish her mission. The crew helped add some padding to Daisy's back. The whip was real, and the lead really used it. It still made a whipping sound even with the padding on. Even if the pain wasn't real, the force used was. The actor might have been too focused on his acting or did it intentionally, but he brandished his whip, and it hit the back of her hand. Chapter 1888. Daisy wasn't expecting that, but she didn't cry out loud. Her arm was burning. She took a sharp breath and her face turned pale. Meanwhile, her shoulders were shuddering. Nobody noticed what had happened, and she didn't ask them to stop. After the director yelled cut, he stood up. "That was good. Let's move to the next one." Freya and the crew helped Daisy up, but they seemed to have touched the hand, and she hissed. Freya asked, "Daisy, are you all right?" Daisy waved her hand. The crew removed the padding from her back. Daisy never mentioned that her hand was whipped before going for an outfit change with Freya. In the changing room, Daisy removed her clothes and saw that there was a huge bruise on her arm. The whip had hit her a few times, and half of her arm had been numb since. Freya came in and saw that bruise, so she rushed forward. "You were hit?" She smiled and replied, "I'm fine. It's common for actors to be hurt while filming. It's swollen. Wait here. I'll get you some ice." Freya left the room and asked for an ice pack from the crew. When she walked past one of the cars, she overheard a conversation. "Mitch, you went so hard just now. Do you think she will suspect anything?" A man's voice followed that. "What's there to suspect? It's common to get hurt during filming. It just means I was into character." Freya was stunned. She slowed down and approached the car. When she was sure she was out of sight, she saw the male lead actor, Mitchell Santos, hugging an actress. He had the woman in his arms and was going to kiss her when she turned away and blocked his lips. "Mitch, don't. What if people see us?" "Susie, I've given her some trouble, so when are you giving me my reward?" Mitchell rubbed her palm. Susan hid her disgust but had to look toward him. "There's no need to rush. We have a lot of time. I'm not going to let you give her some trouble without repaying you. She only cared about James Tell. Mitchell was just someone she was using against Daisy. If it wasn't because he was madly in love with her and would do anything for her, Susan wouldn't even take a second glance at him." Freya looked back and left quickly. When she returned to the changing room, she handed the ice pack to Daisy, who applied it to her bruised area. The burning pain quickly subsided. Daisy noticed that Freya had something to say and asked, "What's wrong?" Freya looked toward the door and lowered her voice. "Do you think that the actor was just too into character?" Daisy paused. "Why do you ask?" Freya pulled out a chair and sat down. "When I was coming back, I saw him hugging Susan. He intentionally hurt you and said he was teaching you a lesson on her behalf." Daisy was silent. Teaching me a lesson on Susan's behalf? She had never done anything to Susan. Was it because she had called James a useless man? Freya asked, "Daisy, did you cross her?" Daisy snapped back and suddenly chuckled. "I guess." She didn't care too much about it. However, the next scene they were going to film was going to be when they broke up, and she would slap the male lead. Daisy was ready when she looked toward Mitchell. "Should I really slap you?" Mitchell was getting his makeup touched up. He was stunned upon hearing that, but he smiled and said, "Of course. That would make it look real." Chapter 1889. Every actor would have to go through some scenes where they might be hit. On top of that, she was a woman, so no matter how hard she slapped him, it wouldn't be too bad. He was a man, so if he couldn't even take that, he wouldn't be able to survive long in the industry. Daisy's smile was wide. Great. When the filming started, Daisy slapped him, and the force made him lose his balance and take a few steps back. Mitchell was stunned. Daisy turned around to speak to the director. "I'm sorry, can we redo that? I was too in character and slapped him too hard." Daisy then looked worried. "I'm so sorry, Mitch. Are you all right?" Mitchell never expected she would be so strong. The slap made his face swell up. He had been acting for years, and never had he been slapped so hard. That was too much. Was she taking revenge for the whipping? No way. He touched his face, but forced a smile. "It's fine." The second time Daisy put all her energy on her arm, and that slap was even harder than the previous one. He saw stars, and half his face turned red and swelled up. Freya could see what was going on. Daisy may have said she didn't mind, but was actually taking revenge. The assistant director thought it was weird, so he went to the director. "Was that too hard?" The director said, "No. The lead is supposed to slap him because she hates him so much. There was no way she would lightly slap him." Mitchell agreed that the slap should be a real slap too. The assistant director had nothing to say because the actors had discussed the slap. After the filming ended, Daisy walked toward Mitchell with an ice pack. She had to try really hard not to laugh when she saw how angry he was. "Mitch." He smiled and stood up. "Yes?" Daisy handed the ice pack to him and looked so sincere that even she believed it. "I'm really sorry about that. I was so into the character, so the slaps were pretty hard. You wouldn't blame me, would you?" Mitchell's veins popped while he clenched his jaw. But since she had given him a chance to step down and apologize, it would show that he wasn't graceful if he made it into a big deal. "Of course, I wouldn't. Actors might lose control when they are too into character. That's very common." Daisy smiled sweetly. "I'm glad you could understand. I didn't expect a man who has great acting skills like you to be a great person too." Mitchell was happy to be praised. "Thanks, Ms. Vanderbilt." She spoke to him for a little longer and looked toward Freya, who was behind Mitchell. Their eyes met, and she excused herself from Mitchell after getting her message. The moment Daisy turned around, she revealed a shallow smile. As expected, the next day, news about Daisy intentionally slapping Mitchell too hard turned into a trending subject. The netizens argued because some thought Mitchell was too weak, while others said that Daisy put too much force, and so on. The fans of both actors were arguing, and Twitter turned into a battlefield. Daisy sat in her chair, going through the script and ignoring all that was happening online. When she heard a commotion, she looked up and closed her script, then got up to ask the crew, "What's happening?" One of the crew members replied, "It seems like the fans of Mr. Santos are causing a scene here." "Don't worry, Ms. Vanderbilt. The crew will take care of it." Chapter 1890. The crew always felt that Daisy was very professional, but this time, it was obvious that Mitchell's fans were the ones who had crossed the line. Mitchell's slap was discussed between them before the filming started. Daisy had slapped him just to make it look more realistic. Nobody knew that it would turn into a trending topic. Daisy didn't say anything. It seemed as though she had expected all that to happen. The fans were barricaded outside and tried to defend Mitchell, yelling for Daisy to explain herself. The director didn't want this matter to blow out of proportion, so he asked Mitchell to handle it. Mitchell and Susan tried to calm them down, just saying good things about Daisy and never mentioning who was at fault the entire time. The fans were angry that their idol had to take the hit, but they couldn't calm down now that he was defending her. "Mitchell, your face is still swollen. It's Daisy Vanderbilt's fault, but why are you defending her? That breaks our hearts. You're too nice. That's why you were bullied." "Who is Daisy?" "She just won the Best Actress award. If it weren't for her family's influence, she would have never won that. The award is suspiciously won." Susan was overjoyed as she listened to Mitchell's fans scolding Daisy. Mitchell had quite a lot of fans, and even if they couldn't do anything to Daisy, it was good enough to cast a negative light on her. And since Mitchell was defending her, it made him look graceful. Thus, it made Daisy look like someone who would bully others because of her power. Daisy was the Goldman princess and had a powerful family. On the other hand, Mitchell had gotten to where he was because of his merits, so it drew sympathy. It was all Daisy's fault. If she hadn't slapped him so hard, they wouldn't have had a chance to be upset with her. Susan spoke up too. "I know you feel bad for Mitchell, but this will affect him. Daisy didn't mean to slap him so hard. She is a good actress, so it is normal for her acting to be realistic. It was better if she hadn't said that." Unsurprisingly, Mitchell's fans broke out after she did. "What do you mean didn't mean to? It's definitely intentional. We don't care who she is. We just want justice for Mitchell." Daisy walked over slowly. "What justice?" Susan and Mitchell were stunned and turned around to see her. How could she not hide but instead show up after things blew up? Susan walked toward her. "Ms. Vanderbilt, please don't be angry. They're Mitch's fans, and just feel bad for him. Don't blame them." Susan won over the fans' hearts as she spoke up for them. "Susan, thanks for caring, but this is between the fans. It's best if you don't get involved. It would be terrible if you were dragged into this too." Mitchell looked toward Daisy and smiled. "Ms. Vanderbilt, I apologize on behalf of my friends for causing this much trouble. It was all a misunderstanding." "I'm glad you know that it was a misunderstanding. What attitude is this?" His fans were unhappy. "Mitchell and Susan were defending you, yet you said that this was a misunderstanding instead of apologizing?" Daisy smiled. "It really is just a misunderstanding.